I may do that for Greenland, too. I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that.
U.S. President Donald Trump doubled down on his plan to acquire Greenland, escalating a transatlantic dispute that has drawn sharp rebukes from European leaders. In a post on his Truth Social platform, Trump said NATO had warned Denmark for years about the Russian threat to Greenland and claimed Copenhagen had failed to act. Now it is time, and it will be done, Trump wrote. Trump has threatened sweeping tariffs against European allies unless Denmark agrees to the complete and total purchase of Greenland by the United States. Trump announced that beginning February 1, 2026, the United States would impose a 10% tariff on goods from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland until a deal is reached to transfer Greenland to U.S. ownership. Amid all this, Russia is watching with glee as Trump's drive to acquire Greenland widens splits with Europe, even though his moves could have serious security ramifications for Moscow, which covets its own presence in the Arctic. Earlier, at a plenary session of the 6th International Arctic Forum, the Arctic Territory of Dialogue, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that competition in the Arctic between various nations is growing as U.S. President Donald Trump seeks to annex Greenland and NATO increases its activities in the region.
As they say in such cases, if you don't want to, so be it. We'll work with those who want to. However, it's obvious that the role and significance of the Arctic, both for Russia and for the entire world, are growing. But the same is true for geopolitical competition, unfortunately, the struggle for positions in this region. Suffice it to say, and everybody knows about it very well, suffice it to say that the United States plans to support the accession of Greenland. It's only at first glance, it might be a surprise for anybody, and it would be a grave mistake to believe that these are just some eccentric talk of new American administration. Nothing of the kind. In fact, such plans were obvious back in 1860s. Back then, the U.S. administration considered the possibility of annexation of Greenland and Iceland, but this idea was not supported by Congress at that time. Let me remind you that by 1869, the American papers laughed at the purchase of Alaska. The deal was called a folly. Alaska was called an icebox. And polar bears garden of Andrew Johnson, the U.S. president at the time. So the suggestion to incorporate Greenland failed at the time, but now the purchase of Alaska obviously is looked at the U.S. quite differently, just like the deeds of Andrew Johnson. So it is nothing surprising about what's happening now, especially since the story only started back then, but it continued later on. In 1910, a tripartite swap transaction was put together, bringing together the United States, Germany, and Denmark. The Greenland would go to the United States, but the transaction failed at the time. During the Second World War, the United States deployed military bases in Greenland to protect its from Nazis, prevent its capture by Nazis. But after the end of the war, the U.S. suggested to buy the island from Denmark, and just recently, judging by international history. So we're talking major plans, serious plans of the U.S. with respect to Greenland. And as I just mentioned, those plans have deep historic roots, and it is obvious that the United States will continue to promote the geopolitical, military, and economic interests in the Arctic. As to Greenland, I think this is an issue that concerns two states and has nothing to do with us. However, We are concerned with the fact that the NATO countries increasingly identify the far north as a foothold for possible conflicts. They do military exercises in these conditions, primarily using the forces of their new recruits, Finland and Sweden, and up to recently we've had no issues with them. So somehow they create these with their own hands. Why? No idea. Nonetheless, we'll be guided by the actual situation. We'll respond to this. Let me stress, Russia has never threatened anybody in the Arctic, but we are watching very closely the recent developments. We develop our response capabilities by enhancing our combat capabilities and upgrading military infrastructure. We will not allow an encroachment of the sovereignty of our country. We will safely protect our national interests. By maintaining peace and stability in the polar region, we will ensure long-term socio-economic development of the region and improvement of the standards of living of people living here and preservation of the unique environment. The stronger our positions, the greater the results, the more opportunities we'll have to launch global international projects in the Arctic with the participation of friendly countries. Friendly states, and possibly Western countries, if, of course, they demonstrate interest to joint work. I'm confident that the time for such projects will definitely come. Dear friends, the Arctic zone is responsible for about 1/4 of the Russian territory. Here, more than 2 million our citizens live and work, and they made a major contribution to our advancement. According to estimates, the Arctic is responsible for 7% of the GDP of Russia and about 11% of our exports. And we see that the prospects are indeed tremendous, the prospects for future comprehensive development of the region. A major area is strengthening the transport and logistical framework of the Arctic. I'd like to stress that this year we celebrate 500 years since the first mentioning in the historic sources of a audacious idea of Russian seafarers and fishermen about a possible trade route along the northern seas to the east to China, along the so-called North-Eastern Passage, a prototype of today's Northern Sea route. Over the past 10 years, the cargo traffic on the Northern Sea route from the Kara gates to the Bering Strait has increased by an order of magnitude. In 2014, only 4 million tons of cargo were brought along this route. Just recently, in 2014, okay? 4 million tons. Last year, almost 38 million tons. It's 5 times the record set back in the Soviet times.